The morning sun shone brightly over the small town forgotten on the map. In the dusty parking lot of the McDonald's, John adjusted his faded cap and took a deep breath of the hot, dry air, as if gathering courage before the daily battle. At 45 years old, his muscles still held the strength of his days in construction, but his gaze carried the invisible weight of recent defeats. It hadn't been long since he led teams, building skyscrapers that touched the sky. Now he wore the red and gold uniform, trying to hold on to what life still offered him with dignity. Inside his pocket, crumpled between old papers, was a photo of his 8-year-old daughter, his greatest treasure, reminding him why he kept going even when the world seemed determined to knock him down. That morning, John walked through the automatic door of the restaurant with steady steps, unaware that today held something different. Something that would start with humiliation, but end with hope. The smell of French fries and burnt coffee filled the still empty dining room of the McDonald's. John crossed the shiny floor, discreetly waving at a few colleagues who, between muffled laughs, barely hid their judgmental stares. "Look, the veteran," whispered one of the younger cashiers, barely hiding his laugh. John pretended not to. Here. He knew that here age was more of a burden than a badge. Every day he had to prove twice as much to earn the same. Behind the counter, he put on his gloves, adjusted his apron, and took his place at the service station. The manager, a young guy in his 20s, approached with a clipboard in hand and a cold smile. "John, stay sharp today, okay? Yesterday you delayed an order. We can't afford to make mistakes." John simply nodded, holding back the response that burned in his throat. He knew he wasn't the first to make a mistake, but maybe he was the easiest to blame. The clock struck 8:45 when the first test of the day arrived. A man in a perfect suit, brand-name sunglasses, entered with large strides. He was talking on his phone, gesturing with arrogance. Without taking the phone off his ear, he placed his order, a black coffee. "No sugar. Quick." John calmly took the order, prepared the cup, and handed it over, but the lid slipped from his hand at the last second, spilling a small drop onto the tray. The man looked at him as if he had committed a crime. "Seriously? Is it really that hard to get a coffee right?" John opened his mouth to apologize, but the man had already turned his back, scoffing loudly as he left. On the other side of the counter, colleagues exchanged glances and snickers. John picked up the dirty tray, slowly wiping up the small coffee spill. Every move he made was an effort to prevent anger or shame from taking over. As he cleaned, he whispered to himself, like a silent prayer, "Just one more shift, John. Just one more shift." He didn't know it yet, but fate was starting to turn, even if in small steps. Here is the English translation of your scene. The restaurant was filling up quickly. Lines formed at the counter and the self-order kiosks. Children screamed, teenagers snapped pictures of their meals, executives typed on their phones with their eyes glued to the screens. It was just another normal day, except for John. Behind the counter, he moved like a silent machine, assembling orders, cleaning trays, smiling at customers, even when the smiles seemed like a mask about to crack. In the middle of the rush, an elderly woman supported by a cane approached the register. "Good morning, sir. Sorry for the delay. My hands are a bit shaky." John, without hurry, smiled for real for the first time that day. "No problem, ma'am. Take your time, okay?" As he helped her with her order, one of the managers shot an impatient look from the kitchen. John saw it, but ignored it. He preferred being human over being fast. Behind the lady, a woman in her early 30s wearing simple jeans and her hair in a bun, observed the scene carefully. Her eyes were serene, attentive, and, unlike the others, they didn't carry judgment. When the lady finished, John carefully handed her the tray. "If you need help sitting down, just call me." The lady smiled, touched before heading to a table. The woman in jeans, now at the register, looked at John in a way he found unusual. It wasn't pity, it was respect. "Hi, I'd like a Big Mac and a black coffee, please." John entered the order and, with a subtle smile, made the coffee with full attention, this time without spilling a drop. Before she left, the woman quietly said, "Thank you for what you did for her." Not everyone would have the patience. John simply nodded, a bit unsettled. He was used to criticism, not gratitude. As she walked away, the manager approached, frowning. "John, try to be faster, okay? We're building up a line." John lowered his head and returned to work. His dignity wasn't in speed, it was in how, even under pressure, he could still be human. And in the back of the restaurant, the woman sat with her coffee, watching every one of his movements carefully. The activity in the McDonald's exploded. A never-ending line of nervous customers snaked through the dining room, and the constant sound of orders echoed like hammering. John, sweaty and exhausted, tried to keep up. Order after order, without a break. His muscles ached, his head throbbed. And then it happened. A man in a light grey suit, expensive watch gleaming on his wrist, angrily approached the counter, banging his tray down forcefully. "I ordered no pickles! Look at this! Are you deaf or just incompetent?" The whole restaurant seemed to freeze. For a second, all eyes turned to John. The manager rushed over, eyes flashing. "John, fix this now!" John swallowed hard. He took the sandwich back with steady hands, even though his face burned with embarrassment. With a calm voice, he said, "Sorry, sir. I'll correct it immediately for you." The man scoffed, rolling his eyes as if John were invisible. Behind him, some young people snickered discreetly. John, with precise movements, remade the order, without hurry, without losing his dignity. When he handed the new sandwich over, he bowed his head slightly. "Here you go, sir. No pickles. I hope you have a good day." The man snatched the bag from his hand and left without a word. The manager muttered, "You need to be more attentive, John. You're hurting the store's flow." John felt the weight of humiliation. Inside, a part of him screamed, wanting to throw the apron on the floor and walk out. But then he touched his pocket discreetly, where he kept the photo of his daughter, and remembered why he was here. He took a deep breath. "I'll do better, sir." He said just that, without raising his voice, without losing his calm. At the back of the dining room, the woman in simple jeans, the same one who had thanked him for his kindness, watched it all. Her eyes narrowed in a determined gesture. Something was about to change. The day was dragging on. The hours seemed longer and the pace more relentless. The afternoon sun was hitting the windows, bringing a bit of relief from the suffocating heat of McDonald's. John was exhausted, but his body had already become accustomed to the routine. Even in the face of more challenges and judgmental looks, he stood firm, like a rock, increasingly devalued by those around him. The next order, however, brought an unexpected twist. As he crossed the dining room, the woman in jeans and a bun approached again. This time her gaze wasn't just observant but determined. She approached the counter with a confidence that drew everyone's attention. "Hi, John," she said, with a gentle but firm smile. "I'm Leticia. I know you don't know me, but I've been watching you since early this morning." John looked up, surprised. He didn't know what to expect. Leticia continued, "I know you didn't ask for any of this, but I want to thank you. I noticed how patient and human you've been, and despite all the judgment and humiliation, you haven't lost your dignity." The room fell silent, as if the rest of the world had taken a step back to listen to what Leticia had to say. She took a step closer to John, now looking him directly in the eyes. "I'm from a foundation that supports workers in situations like yours. And honestly, you deserve a better chance. I'd like to talk to you about an opportunity that could change your life. But more than that, I want you to know that no matter how hard it seems, your integrity is seen. And it's worth more than any judgment they try to pass on you." John was stunned. This woman, who he hadn't even exchanged a word with until that moment, now seemed to be his last chance. "What you're saying? Is this for real?" he asked, not believing it. Leticia smiled and handed him a business card. "Here's my number. Call me when you can. Maybe you don't need to be here anymore. Maybe what you really need is an opportunity where your strength and character are valued, not diminished." And with those words, she turned and left through the door, leaving John standing there holding the card in his hands. He felt the weight of the world shifting, not because of a great victory or immediate change, but because of the small spark of hope that had just been ignited. The restaurant continued its frenetic pace, but for John, That moment meant more than the end of a shift. He somehow knew that something was about to change. He finally believed that his daily struggles could have a greater purpose. The sun was already setting on the horizon, painting the sky in golden and orange hues. But at McDonald's, the day still seemed endless. John was in the back of the kitchen, washing the last tray of his shift, when the sound of his phone ringing in the pocket of his apron caught his attention. He took the phone with his soapy hand, looked at the number, and without hesitation, answered. "Hello? Hi, John, it's Leticia. I spoke with you earlier today, remember? How are you?" John's heart raced. He couldn't believe she was calling. He tried to stay calm, but his voice came out shakier than he wanted. "Yes, of course, I remember. I'm heading home now, but..." "Listen, John, I wanted to invite you to an interview. It's an important position, something that could change your life. The foundation is offering a chance for a worker rehabilitation project. I know you have experience in construction, and that's exactly what we need. If you accept, we'll have another chance to transform what you already know into something that can really make a difference." John fell silent for a moment, processing the words. It felt surreal. He who had recently felt invisible was now receiving an opportunity like this. I don't know what to say," he replied, choking on his emotions. "Is this real?" Leticia laughed softly. "It's very real, John. You've been through so much. And I think it's time for you to start being recognized for who you are, not for what others try to make you believe." He looked around at the bright lights over the restaurant, the faces that cared little about his silent struggle. He felt a wave of gratitude, but also an impulse to question himself. Was he ready to leave behind everything he knew? "I accept," he said finally, with determination. "I accept." The conversation ended with a promise to meet the next day, and as he put the phone back in his pocket, John felt a lightness he hadn't felt in a long time. Something had changed in his perspective. The next day, John wore his nicest clothes, something he hadn't worn in years, and went to the interview. He felt a mix of nervousness and hope, as if crossing an invisible line between two worlds, the one before and the one that was to come. Weeks later, John found himself with a new uniform, now with a badge that didn't say McDonald's, but Social Projects Coordinator. He was at a construction site with the team giving orders, with the confidence of someone who knew that this path was more than a personal victory. It was a fight for dignity, not just for him, but for everyone else like him. Leticia continued by his side like a guide, and every day John saw more and more people who, like him, were getting the chance to rewrite their stories. And on a sunny morning, looking at the horizon, John felt that everything finally made sense. He no longer had to be just the invisible man at the restaurant, the shadow of a past that didn't value him. He was now someone capable of changing his own destiny. "Just one more shift," he whispered to himself, but this time with a smile, knowing that this shift was the beginning of everything. Leticia greeted him at the entrance of the foundation with a welcoming smile. "You're welcome, John. This is the first step of many." The interview wasn't easy. They talked about his experience, his failures, and most importantly, his resilience. What impressed Leticia the most was the way he spoke about his daughter, his main motivation. "You're not here to conquer the world, John. You've already won every day just by not giving up," she said sincerely. At the end of the conversation, she stood up and extended her hand. "You've been chosen, John. We have an opportunity for you in the area of project coordination for social impact projects. It's a big step, but I believe you can take it, and you won't be alone anymore." John shook her hand with a smile, now no longer forced. He felt like he had finally found his place, and that perhaps the battles he had fought in the past weren't in vain.